Good morning, business finance students. We are going to cover chapter 21 this week, and it's an important chapter. It talks about a subject that is mainly focused on weighted average cost of capital. We have a discussion board here. Discussion board is not graded. You can post anything related to business finance. If you have any questions, if you find a good article, and if you find something good news. I heard that the stock market today is going to go up. If you find one, why, you may go ahead and post it on the discussion board. Any questions you want related to what's going on with this chapter or any other chapters, any subject related to finance and articles, we would like to read about them. Therefore, that is one of the things you will do, and it is not graded. And there are some problems here to solve, and I am going to lecture about one of the main concepts, that is called weighted average cost of capital. Cost of capital, think about cost of capital as interest. That's a cost. If you need a capital, you have to go and borrow or get someone, bring a shareholder, and that will cost you. Therefore, think about cost of borrowing money. You all know cost of borrowing money is called interest. Therefore, think about this, and is that in any businesses, for example, let's say you have $100,000, you have opened a restaurant, and you are short by $100,000. You go to one bank and say, we give you $50,000 at the interest rate of 10%. Another bank gives you $50,000 at a interest rate of 20%. Therefore, one of them 10%, one of them 20%. And each of them is giving you 50,000. If I ask you, what is the average, weighted average cost of capital? If I ask you, how much interest are you paying overall? Your answer shouldn't be 10%. Your answer shouldn't be 20%. The answer is 15%. How did we come up with this 15%? Because 15 is the average of 10% and 20%. It is somewhere between. But this was a very simple example. Why simple example? Because the numbers were clear. You needed $50,000 from one bank and then 50 to another bank. How about if you needed $20,000? Suppose the bank which gave you a good rate, which was 10%, it only gave you $20,000, and you had no other choice to go and borrow the rest of the money, which is $80,000, from the other bank, which means the other bank is charging you 20%, but that one, the weight is heavy because it is giving you 80% of your money, which is 80,000. In that case, you have a formula. You would say that the weighted average cost of capital, for example, is, 20 times, 10% plus 80 times 20%. Do you see? Now you are calculating the average cost. And in this case, let me assure you, it is going to be more than 50%, more than 15%, because that $80,000, which is carrying 20% interest, is putting a lot of pressure on interest rate, and most suddenly your interest rates might be, if you do that calculation, the interest rate might come to 17%. Therefore, I put one of the problems in here to show you an example. Imagine you have a restaurant. This is an example of a restaurant that you have. Think about it as three sources of areas that you need money from. And therefore, not everybody. You go to bank, and the bank tells you that they give you interest rate of 4%. You need $100,000, and the bank is going to give you, 4%. However, the bank is going to give you that it is not going to give you more than 35,000. Do you see that? Therefore, in that case, you have to multiply this 4% by this 35% because $35,000 of that $100,000 comes from the bank and the bank is charging you 4%. Now you need extra money to bring it to 100,000. Imagine there is a lawyer that comes and says, okay, he is going to be a partner with you. This time, bank is not your partner, bank is your lender. He is more like a semi-partner. Preferred stock, you think about it as something between a partner and a bank, semi. And the lawyer tells you that he or she is going to give you, once he or she expects 9% of the profits that you make. Therefore, let's see how much that lawyer is going to give you. The lawyer is going to give you is giving you 15,000. Then in that case we will multiply this 9% by this 15% to see how much lawyer is costing us. And then you go to sell shares to a doctor, and the doctor tells you he or she will give you $50,000. Therefore, you raised your $100,000 because this 35 and 15 is $50,000 and 50, 100,000. And you raised the money that you wanted. And however, you are paying different, cost. One cost, with the lowest cost was the bank, but maybe your wish was to get all of it from the bank, but the bank is not going to give you $100,000. It only gives you 35,000. You had no other choice to go to the doctor and get this one, and you had no other choice to go to the common stock and to the doctor gave you this one, the lawyer gave you this one, and you raised your $100,000. And now you have your own $100,000, 200,000, and you buy your, restaurant. Now someone asks you how much the cost of borrowing or bringing, how much cost of capital. You raised capital. In all three cases, you raised capital. But how much the cost is, we don't know whether it is 4%, 9%, or 10%. If each one of these have given you equal percentage, because equal percent, 33% here, 33% here, 33, here, which is 33,000, 33, that is 100,000, then it would have been average, easy, because the easy would be the average of these three numbers. We could add 10 by 4, 14, and 9 to 24, and then we would divide 24 by 3, because these are three numbers, that would be 8%. But because these percentages here are different, it makes our life a little bit difficult. Therefore, we have to find which one of these. Do you see I came with 8%, but it is actually not 8%. Let's see which one of these is the correct answer. We come here and multiply. Weighted average cost of capital. It says that take the weight of the bank. What is the weight of the bank? The weight of the bank was 35%, and multiply it by the Armin's rate, the rate that the bank is charging you. That's 4%. Here it is. This is 4%. Then add it with the weight that the lawyer, who is one of the partners, semi-partners, is, has, the weight that he has or she has is 15%. He or she gave you $15,000, for example. And then it comes in here. And what is the expected, that lawyer, how much that lawyer is expecting? He or she wants dividends of your company. As the bank wants the interest on your company, this lawyer is expecting you give him or her dividend. Therefore, how much expectation this lawyer has? This lawyer had expectation is 9. And that's why he is not as much, or she's not taking as much risk as the bank is taking. Therefore, he's taking more risk than what the bank is there, that's why he or she is expecting more. And also there is a real, rich guy who or girl who is a doctor who is giving you $50,000, but that doctor is giving his money or her money is becoming a partner, hoping that this business, because you promised him or her doctor, this business is a good business. I am going to take 10% profit every year. The doctor says, oh, 10%. Therefore, that's a good, profit. Therefore, I am going to give you, my money, and therefore that will be, and of course, it would be kind of complicated in terms of when I say, for simplicity, I said 10%, and therefore, but have it in mind that just for the concept of understanding, therefore, the weight that the doctor has given you 50% of the money that you needed, which in our simple example was $50,000, and the hope, the rate that the doctor is expecting to receive. The doctor is expecting to receive 10%. We average this. That's why it is called weighted average. When we do the calculation, is right in here. It comes to what? 7.75%. Therefore, if someone comes to you as the owner of that restaurant and tells you that when you bring money into your business, what is the weighted average cost of capital for your business? Your answer would be 775. Of course, some of them are costing you low. That's, this from the bank. Some of you cost a little bit more, and some of you cost more. Which one is preferable? You shouldn't necessarily think that, of course, the 4% is less, but sometimes bringing a doctor into business might be a better idea, even if the doctor is expecting 10%. Why is that? Just imagine next year, suddenly Corona hit, and your restaurant is shut down. If your restaurant is shut down, this doctor is the owner of that restaurant, just like you. That doctor is not going to shut down your restaurant because he's an owner or she's an owner just like you. However, this bank that was so nice, that was charging you 4%, if you do not give the bank the 4%, that bank is going to go and force your company into bankruptcy. Therefore, you as a financial manager has to decide which mix of these is the best for you. For your one company, there might be bringing more shareholders. For another company, bringing more. That depends. Chief financial officer has to run all these numbers to understand. If someone asks this restaurant owner how much is the cost of capital to this restaurant, is the cost of capital on average, WACC, weighted average cost of capital, is for this restaurant is 7.75%. There might be another restaurant that the average cost of capital might be 9%. Do you see that? Therefore, in that term, you say, oh, it is that restaurant, the people or the organizations who are expecting, things from them, they are expecting higher return from them. Maybe that is a kind of riskier restaurant. Do you see that? That's why when your credit card, your credit score is not good, the credit card company charges more interest. That means that the cost of capital to you is higher because your credit is not good. Therefore, one of the things the managers have to do, the financial managers, to decide what is the average cost of capital to their company and constantly watch these numbers and compare that to other similar companies and come up with the best solution. Because sometimes if they feel that the cost of doctor who is a partner is costing too much, maybe the chief financial officer, or in this case, the restaurant owner, can easily sit down and talk to the doctor. And in order to keep the doctor, he or she can buy some shares of the doctor If the doctor, if the lawyer, the restaurant is doing well, maybe the restaurant can go and borrow a little bit more money from the bank at 4% and reduces the ownership of the doctor. That way, when the profits come, therefore, he or she, the restaurant owner, can pocket more money because he or she was able to reduce the weighted average cost of capital by buying the stocks of the doctor or even buying the stocks of the lawyer. However, you don't want always to do that. As I said, when you eliminate this doctor, you are creating risk when you borrow more money. Sometimes borrowing more money is a great idea because if your restaurant becomes, sells $1 million of food, at the end you come and say, oh my God, why did I bring the doctor? Why did I bring the lawyer? I could go after 1 year, borrow everything from the bank, and I could pay them off and I could pocket, hundreds of thousands of profits. Therefore, I want you to understand the importance of cost of weighted average cost of capital. And I want you to, therefore, this was a multiple choice question. I think the correct answer was 7.75, and that is a weighted average cost of capital, 7.75. Therefore, I want you to study. I gave you an easy example because I gave you an example when I said the doctor puts 35,000 and this is 35%. Do you see 35,000 and 35% are somehow similar? 15% of it. I rounded the numbers, But if I had told you the doctor had put, the loan you only needed instead of 100,000, you needed, let's say, 50,000, then you had to see 35% of 50,000 is not 35,000 anymore. It is half of that. 15% of 50,000 is not 100,000, is not 15,000. It is half of that, which is 7.5, and 50,000 of 100,000 in this case won't be 50,000. That's 25, which is fine. Again, if you put those numbers with their, weight, you put it in weighted average cost of capital, you still get that 7.75%. Therefore, be aware when the problems are a little bit, twisted, and, therefore, this is a good chapter, an important chapter. Try to learn and think about your own life. That what is weighted, it is a good idea. I am going to put my weighted average cost of capital on the discussion board, and I'll try to be an honest in terms of what I say. And if you want, you can create one for yourself. I have, I would say that I don't encourage you to, have credit card, significant credit card loans. I do have significant, but I know what I am doing. That's why I have significant, credit card loans. And I will put it on the discussion board. I have another loan which I have borrowed from my retirement. That's another loan. And I will put it down. Let me give an example. I already know. In one of the credit cards, which I owe $30,000, I am only paying 4%, in fact. That's not significant, because I know if you owe on credit cards, you have to pay 30-40%. That's why I owe so much, because the interest rates are low. Therefore, I am using that for some purposes. I usually sometimes get, used for some purposes. Then I borrowed from my retirement $20,000. That has $8,000 of 8% of interest rate. Therefore, let me bring an Excel sheet while I am here, see if I can, show it to you. Here you go. Let's say if it is the credit card, I have $20,000 of, loan from the retirement, $30,000 of credit card. The interest rate on this credit card, I am paying 4%. And on this percent, I am paying, 8%. 8%. And then we have a formula, weighted average cost of capital, And the total amount of money that I owe is how much if I add these two, which is 50%, 50,000. Do you see that? 50,000. How much of this $50,000 is this one? This $20,000 is, if I divide 20 by 50,000, do you see that? If I divide by 20,000 by 50,000 is 250 or maybe 40%. 40% of my money, I have to pay 8%. 60% of what I owe, I divide this 30 by this, is 60% of what I owe, I am paying 4%. Therefore, what is the average cost of capital for me is, I put my formula, look at here. The weighted average cost of capital, weighted average cost of capital equals the first weight times the percentage of that weight times, weighted times the percentage of that, W, R1, I call it. R means rate 1, okay? Plus the second weight, weight 2, plus this next times the next one. Next one is 4% times 4%. And here, instead of 8%, I have written times, times, of course, I put R1, but I know that you understood what I'm saying. It's just a matter of the way I typed it quickly. Here you go, times R1, which is 8%. I had to put 8%. Therefore, now it is a very easy calculation. I put my equal sign, and I multiply this. I can open my parentheses. I say this one times this one plus this one times this one, and I close this. And I click enter, which means the weighted average cost of capital 0.56. Let me convert this to percentage. I right click and I click format cell, and I say I want it in percentage, and I click OK. What is the average cost of capital as myself as an individual? It is 5.6%. I am in a good shape. I am not worried as much, although I'm carrying a lot of debt. That's $50,000, but I can afford it. Now, if you are interested to calculate your own cost of capital, or someone else, use an example, your cousin or something, if you don't want to talk your finances. And I am going to, post this one for you on the discussion board, and students who like to talk about their, to post their weighted average cost of capital, they may do that and post it on the discussion board. You always, for the rest of your life, you will have average cost of capital, weighted average cost of capital. Why? You are paying for the car loan, you are paying for credit card, you are paying for the student loan, I don't know, you are paying for the, mortgage, and see if you can calculate that weighted average cost of capital and post it on the discussion board if you want to, or make it up. Make it up doesn't mean if you don't want. Therefore, by posting it, and even if you can create an Excel sheet just the way I have done it, because if you understand this, one of your goals should be, what can I do to reduce this weighted average cost of capital? That's your goal. Of course, the ultimate goal is to not to pay any interest, to pay off your loan, not to have any loan. If I have borrowed, I have a reason. It's not costly to me. Maybe I am using it maybe for a project that is giving me 6%, 10%, or 8% return. if it is giving me, if I am borrowing it at 5.6% and I am getting a return which is 10%, that means I am a good financial manager and I know what I am doing, assuming that I am not taking a lot of risks. In financial management, you constantly have to make a decision that if you accept a project, the return of that project is greater than this cost of weighted average cost of capital. If the return is greater, then you accept that project. If the return is the same, you don't care. If less, you do not accept that project because you are going to lose money on that. That's one of the reasons you have always to do the calculation for the weighted average cost of capital. And that's the responsibility, one of the main responsibilities of managers, financial managers. They constantly get new projects and they constantly have to come into conclusion whether they should accept. Those don't think projects necessarily is they have to go and buy another restaurant or something. It is something is that if I go and switch from this bank to that bank, what will happen to average cost of capital? If it is dropping, I will go for it. If it is increasing, I stay for it. If I have some cash sitting as a financial manager in here and I am using that cash to buy some equipment, is it better to use that cash, buy some equipment, or use the cash and put it in treasuries, in bonds, in stocks, and instead borrow from them? Therefore, all of this change your average cost of capital. And I want you to see the students who understand, who are good in understanding weighted average cost of capital of their lives, are the ones who are going to do very well financially. We try to understand, try to rely as much as, sometimes is having loan for the business. Borrowing might be a great idea. That's why many times businesses go and sell bonds, For some companies, going and investing and buying the bonds of another company might be a good idea. Therefore, these are the different scenarios that a financial manager should make. You will see this posting, this discussion. I will post it on the discussion board and hope I see some students posting some good, discussions about weighted average cost of capital. If you have a business and you want to put that one, feel free to do so. Have a good day.